Let's get this show on the road. Hey, have you ever heard the phrase training for reigning? You probably have, but if you haven't heard it before, you should know that immediately after man was created, God's first command was to multiply and subdue the earth and have dominion over it. In other words, God made man in his image, and then he tells man, hey, go multiply or replicate my image. And that means our call goes way beyond having kids. It means to make disciples. Your kids, by the way, are your disciples. And if you don't have kids, then you should be making disciples of Jesus by pouring into others. Then the next thing that God tells us is, hey, I'm the ultimate king, but I'm going to give you authority and I'm going to give you a purpose. And you are here to rule and reign with me. We're going to do it together. Sound fun? Okay, Brant. This is cool. I hear you. That's great. That sounds like kind of a cool thought, but what does it even look like? You're either one of two guys at this point when you answer this question for yourself. Either you're saying to yourself, what does it look like to rule and reign in my own life? Or you're already ruling and reigning at a certain level in your own life and you're saying, I want to take it to another level, and what does it look like to replicate this standard of living in others' lives? Okay, so both really great questions. Glad you asked. I'm going to attempt to answer from both perspectives in this video. You see, the problem is I talk to way too many men who, when asked, would say, there's almost no sense or feeling of ruling anything in my life. Maybe the marriage is on the rocks or strained. Maybe the kids are always crazy. Maybe work's chaotic and finances are hard. Maybe my health is bad. Think about all the things in life that we don't control. It's overwhelming. Just how exactly are we meant to rule and reign when all sorts of things are out of our control? Well, I can't answer this fully in the short time we have here today, but take a look at Luke chapter 16, verse 10. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. That means two things here in our context of ruling and reigning. That means, first of all, we all start somewhere. You're not going to start ruling and reigning and having dominion over the entire planet. We are going to start within our capacity. And number two, we can always take things to another level. Okay, there's always something. There's always a notch above. There's always something to shoot for and press into. You're always going to start small and then build up. God's not going to give you more than what you can handle today. And it doesn't matter if you're new at this Gladiator thing or if you've been doing it for years. It's always another level to take things to. When Moses was a young man and found out that he wasn't an Egyptian, he found out that he'd been raised as an Egyptian in the palace, but now he's a Hebrew, he was born a slave. He immediately felt God's calling deep within him to help his people because they were slaves. He charged out, ends up killing an Egyptian because he was beating a fellow Hebrew, and and he had the right calling, guys, but he tried to step into his role, his calling within his own strength. And it took God 40 years of walking with Moses in the desert for Moses to gain the capacity to lead over 600,000 people out of slavery. You ever seen even 10,000 people in a room before? Imagine 600,000 plus animals, kids, all of this. I mean, by the time you get it all up there, there's well over a million people that he was leading, that he was in charge of. God took Moses from where he was and led him to where he wanted to get to as far as his capacity, as far as his ability to rule and reign. We all have a certain domain that we are meant to own. We all have a certain sphere of influence in the world. We have big dreams and passions that are not our own. They're God-given dreams. God does to us what he did with Moses. He wants to take us from where we are today and get us to where he wants us to go. James chapter 1 says, it is a thing of great joy to go through trials and hardships because that is what makes a man mature and complete, lacking nothing. In other words, it's the very things that we can't control that God uses as a training ground for learning to rule and reign. In other words, what God could easily handle in His power, in His wisdom, He allows to happen for the purpose of training for reigning. He wants us with Him. What is going on in your life right now? What are your current circumstances? What if this season is training you for reigning? When God's teaching you perseverance, you're probably not going to get a quick answer that day. If God's teaching you endurance, just saying, your situation is going to be prolonged. So you'd better be able to stand for a few weeks at least, if not a few months or maybe even longer. If God's teaching you faithfulness, then your circumstances will probably not be bright, shiny, and easy all the time. He will teach you things like stillness, quietness. You'll have to learn how to rejoice, how to worship, how to pray, how to be comforted by the Holy Spirit, how to own your domain. We all have a certain threshold that we feel confident in being able to handle. When you surpass that threshold, that's when you start feeling out of control, you lose your ability to keep going forward, and that's when we usually crash and burn, right? If you've ever skied before, you probably didn't start out on a black diamond slope. When you first drove your car, you probably didn't start with a Lamborghini going 200 miles an hour. As men, we've got to be able to handle all sorts of things at different times and seasons of life, depending on where we're at. As an adult, you learn to balance family and work and play and finances and spiritual life and life gets hectic. You have to be able to live through all of the journey from a position of peace and authority. Wherever you are right now, you've got a certain threshold, and it's time to take it to another level. This is the time. You've committed to this event. You're going through all the work. Use this brief time in your life. It's only a few weeks. Think about it. This is not like a big stretched out years and years of time. This is a brief blip on the screen of your life. It's a unique opportunity where you've got an army of other men surrounding you and coming in prayer, and they're all coming to this retreat in support of each other. So push yourself to new heights. Be willing to take things way beyond your comfort zone, way beyond what you think you can handle. Stretch yourself, push yourself, awaken spiritual muscles that haven't been worked in a while. Force your mind and heart and body to grow past the pain. Step into who you were meant to become. And by the way, guys, you are meant to be a gladiator. This is who God made you to be. Rule and reign and own your domain. Be faithful in a little so that God will give you more. Love you guys. And I can't wait to see you at the retreat.